Welcome in, friends, to another episode of Saturday Sports Stuff. I'm your host, Mike Mercado, as always joining you from our studios here at Mercado Airwaves. Thank you so much for making us a part of your weekend. We have a jam-packed show for you guys. We talk about the disgusting news out of Michigan State University. The XFL is back. I give you my predictions from NXT Philadelphia and the Royal Rumble. And, of course, your questions and comments. But before we get to all of that, here is a quick message.
Mercado Airwaves is brought to you by supporters at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves.
If you would like to support Mercado Airwaves, visit us at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. Find us on iTunes at Mercado Airwaves. Keep up to date with the show on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. Follow Mike on Twitter at mmercado2333 and on Instagram, MikeMercado2333.
So I'm not even really sure where I want to start off with this story. It's one of the most disgusting things I think we're ever going to cover here on the show. We weren't around for the Penn State travesties and the crimes that were committed over there, but we have a platform now here. And what's happening in Michigan State might be one of the most disturbing, disgusting things that I've read. And the sad thing is, what's going on in Michigan State happens in every major college program, which is one of the big problems I have. So really fast, I just want to kind of give you some outlines of what's going on here. This is obviously coming after Larry Nassar was found guilty of sexual misconduct, sexual assault, rape, all that, and is going to serve 175 years in prison. He had 60 years given on for child pornography. So this is the biggest dirtbag in all of humanity, what we consider that. This is this guy. So we have this outpour come in. This is where I want to get into it. And how hypocritical, how unbelievably corrupt and disturbingly inept the NCAA is. NCAA President Mark Emmert was alerted to Michigan State's sexual assault reports in 2010. This is an article from The Athletic. NCAA President Mark Emmert was specifically alerted in November 2010, 6 months after he was hired as the organization's president, to 37 reports involving Michigan State athletes sexually assaulting women. We're talking about athletes. We're talking about people who work and represent your staff, not just the doctor. Kathy Redmond, the founder of the National Coalition Against Violent Athletes, provided The Athletic with a copy of the letter she sent to Emmert, urging him to better protect women with new, stronger gender violence policy measures. Here is the fourth paragraph of Redmond's letter, which is dated November 17, 2010. For example, despite recent reports of sexual violence involving two Michigan State University basketball players, one of which admitted to raping the victim, neither man was charged criminally or even disciplined by the school. An earlier report of similar violence involving two other Michigan State basketball players also went unaddressed. In the past 2 years alone, this is 2010, 37 reports of sexual assaults by MSU athletes have been reported, but not one disciplinary sanction was imposed by school officials against any of the men involved. And then, after all this Larry Nassar stuff happens, they go ahead and open an investigation. What it's going to do doesn't really matter because the NCAA is in that. So long story short, I guess if you bring in millions of dollars to open up a new basketball arena, you're able to recruit and get to the Final Four. You can do whatever you want on campus. How many stories do we need to finally hear to get these people off of power? These institutions that are allowed to do whatever the hell they want. And we're not talking about one of your players having a little bit too much to drink and a police officer drove him home to make sure he didn't get in trouble. We're talking about covering up sexual assaults and rapes. And this happens everywhere. And then you have the nerve of boosters and students chanting for Izzo, saying that these are good people. You don't get to that high of power without knowing these things. And we've seen it with Penn State. And we refuse to learn. They refuse to learn. But now the spotlight's on them. They could have taken actions. And now the hundreds of women who have been affected by this, the families affected by this, Michigan State deserves to go down. Every institute deserves to go down at this point that allows this. This is a farce when it comes to not playing players, telling us that school schedules matter, and then doing this. This is unbelievable. We'll continue to cover this and give our opinions as we learn more about this investigation, the quote-unquote investigation that the NCAA is going to do, but more importantly, when the U.S. government gets involved, because they will, and they should.
Mercado Airwaves is brought to you by supporters at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves.
If you would like to support Mercado Airwaves, visit us at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. Find us on iTunes at Mercado Airwaves. Keep up to date with the show on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. Follow Mike on Twitter at mmercado2333 and on Instagram, Mike Mercado 2333.
So this past Thursday, Vince McMahon from the WWE and Alpha Entertainment gave us the announcement that they are rebooting the XFL starting in 2020. They're in the process right now of creating the league, creating teams, putting rosters together. It's going to take about 2 years. And to be quite frankly with you guys, this was a move a lot of people saw coming over the last few years. There's been rumbling. If you're a wrestling fan, there's been rumblings about this for a long time. And the announcement came out, and I thought it's more than... Here's the thing. I know why people think this is funny. Because of the powerful National Football League. And you're right. This isn't competition to the NFL. First things first, we have to make that clear. The XFL is not direct competition to the NFL. See, what the XFL is, it's another form of entertainment. Another thing to watch on your television. Another product for Vince McMahon and his genius promotional machine to get behind and try to make money. So when people ask, is he crazy? Yeah, he's crazy. He's crazy like a fox, as the saying goes, right? He knows that there is a market for this. He knows that it doesn't need to be the NFL. It just needs to be good enough to get sponsorship. Quite honestly, it looks pretty good when you're working on a TV deal, huh? When you're trying to sell off your product of Monday Night Raw, Tuesday SmackDown. Oh, and I have this football league from when the NFL ends till about November. How does that sound? It's pretty good, right? And in a world where we literally pay for over 3 different streaming services, we pay for, hell, even more now than 3. You have your Amazons, your Hulus, your Netflixes, you have your HBO Go's. You have so many different things. And you're telling me that there's no room for this. Maybe that's the biasness. Maybe you're biased to that idea that this can't succeed. Will it be a juggernaut? Absolutely not. Are people blinded by the Extreme Football League and what was that gimmick 20 years ago? No. But if it's a football game that's on television that has some names you might know, it could get its ratings. It could find its spot. Would I put my mortgage on it? Absolutely not. But with all that in mind, there is some things I wanted to get into. And it is this idea of creating what this league represents. What is it? And just like anything else, if you're a wrestling fan, you knew what was coming. It doesn't matter what society believes. It doesn't matter what the common people think, what the common thought is. Vince McMahon does what Vince McMahon wants to do. So when the controversy came out, and I'll be honest with you, I think going into it, I was pretty surprised. I'm like, you know what? This might work. And as I started listening to Vince McMahon during the press conference, taking these questions, giving these answers, there were some things that concerned me. And it starts off with something like Vince saying, if you have any sort of criminal record or commit a crime, you aren't playing in this league. Continues saying, you want someone who does not have any criminality associated whatsoever with them. Even if you have a DUI, you would not play in the XFL. So that will probably eliminate some of them. Not all of them. If Tim Tebow wants to play, he can very well play. This was coming after somebody asked him specifically about Kaepernick, Johnny Manziel, and Tim Tebow. Now, quite frankly, I give a damn about Johnny Manziel. I hope he gets healthy. I hope he takes care of his life. I hope the best for him. But the thing about Kaepernick kind of bothered me. Now, paraphrasing, McMahon also said when it came to Kaepernick about playing the league, they will have to follow the rules. And it seems like one of the rules is, as he was calling, the time-honored tradition of standing for the national anthem. That people don't want to watch football for political opinions. That it's not a place for that. That people want to get away and watch the pure game of football. Well, here's the thing. You sound tone deaf, Vince McMahon. And it's not wrestling as in maybe in another segment where I say, hey, the fans don't like Roman Reigns. Maybe you should give them who they like. No. This is saying, as a private business, we don't care what it looks like, how it sounds. We're straight up telling you, this is what we believe. If you don't believe it, kick rocks. Which is fine. But read the room. That's the problem I have. It kind of sounds like a boys club. It kind of sounds like it doesn't matter if you're the best athlete. It doesn't matter if you're the most qualified. If you don't meet our criteria, we don't want you. And this is the problem. This is why it's so complicated. Yeah, in theory, you're right. Like, they're a privately owned business. There's no right that says I am able to play in the XFL. But to be so blatant about it, and to me, do I think the NFL has suffered from some of the political nonsense that's going on? Of course. But that's how stuff gets done. It's called platforms. It's called having the platform to spread a message. Now, has Colin Kaepernick's message been bastardized? Yeah, absolutely it has. But to say that, to go out of your way to say Tim Tebow is welcome in our league and not Colin Kaepernick, I would rather 100 Colin Kaepernicks than 100 Tim Tebow. Now, some people may think I'm a snowflake or a social justice warrior. I just know how to read a room. And I know what sounds good and what doesn't sound good. The story isn't the XFL is coming back. The story is what Vince doesn't want Colin Kaepernick playing in his league. Which should have been a cool gimmick day, then became a controversy. But then again, it's not like Vince doesn't like stirring the pot, is it?
If you would like to support Mercado Airwaves, visit us at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. Find us on iTunes at Mercado Airwaves. Keep up to date with the show on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. Follow Mike on Twitter at mmercado2333 and on Instagram, MikeMercado2333.
Mercado Airwaves is brought to you by supporters at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves.
All right, it is Royal Rumble weekend, but before we get to the main card, let's take a look at the Saturday NXT TakeOver Philadelphia show. We start off with Cassius Ohno versus the Velveteen Dream. I'm going with the Velveteen Dream in that one. It looks like this guy has all the makings to be a star, so look out for Velveteen Dream. And look out for Cassius Ohno's documentary that they're working on with WWE about his travels in the wrestling world all over the world, so that is something to look out for. Then we have the Undisputed Era, Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly, the champions, versus the authors of Pain, Akam, and Rezar, with Paul Ellering for the NXT Tag Team Championships. I think this one goes to the Undisputed Era. You're probably going to see Authors of Pain make the main roster jump anytime now. Maybe this week on Monday Night Raw. Raw desperately needs some other tag teams in that division, but maybe after WrestleMania in about 2 or 3 months, so that's something to keep an eye out for. In the NXT Women's Championship match, we have the champion Ember Moon versus Shayna Baszler. I think they're going to give it to the hot start of Shayna Baszler. She had a great showing in the Mae Young Classic. All the women that they're bringing in from the Mae Young Classics, all the new signings, it's just better to have a heel champion and one who's as dominant as Shayna. So I'm going to go with Shayna in that one. And maybe the match of the weekend, what might steal the match of the weekend, in an Extreme Rules match, it is Aleister Black versus Adam Cole. This one's a toss-up. I think at the end of WrestleMania weekend after NXT TakeOver New Orleans, I think Aleister Black walks out as champion. So I think this is the way that it's going to end up playing out, because when we go into our main event, it kind of makes you think like where exactly everybody's going to play out to. So, for example, I think Aleister Black is going to win this. And in our main event, you have Andre Cien Almas with Selena Vega versus Johnny Gargano for the NXT Championship. I'm going with Cien Almas. I think Tommaso Ciampa comes back and costs Johnny Gargano the match and the championship. Let's do a little fortune telling then. It looks like an NXT TakeOver New Orleans, the WrestleMania show. You're probably going to have Aleister Black versus Andrade Cien Almas for the NXT Championship. Johnny Gargano versus Tommaso Ciampa. And you know what? I take that back. Maybe Adam Cole, it's Adam Cole, Aleister Black, and Cien Almas for the NXT Championship at WrestleMania, at least in WrestleMania weekend. But just like any other NXT card, I think sometimes the build for the undercard is a little lackluster, but every single time, and I dare you to prove me otherwise, the NXT show typically steals the weekend, and it's always an amazing show. It's always a fun 2.5 hours to watch. So those are my predictions for NXT TakeOver Philadelphia. Let us know, who do you think is going to win these matches, and what do you think moving forward coming into WrestleMania season? But now it is time for the main card. It is Royal Rumble weekend, a historic one with a women's Royal Rumble match. But let's get into the card. You have the Usos, Jimmy and Jay Uso versus Chad Gable and Shelton Benjamin. I think after the DWI out of one of the Usos, I think the way just the story booking is going for the future of the tag division, I think you give it to the hot tag team of Chad Gable and Shelton Benjamin. In the other tag team championship match, you have Seth Rollins and Jason Jordan versus Cesaro and Sheamus. I have no idea if Jason Jordan is fighting Seth Rollins at WrestleMania. But whatever the storyline is going to, whether it's against Kurt Angle, against Seth Rollins, whether it's anything in that with him turning heel, it has to start right now with them losing the tag team champions. So I think Cesaro and Sheamus walk out of Royal Rumble with the Raw Tag Team Championships. For the United States Championship, an open invitation between Bobby Roode and a guest opponent. Obviously, I think this is Dolph Ziggler, and I think Dolph Ziggler is going to walk away with the United States Championship tonight. And something we saw teased at Raw 25, you have Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson versus the Revival. Well, I think the Balor Club might be getting somewhat of a push. I think you might see the Revival get the win just because, even Steven's booking in the WWE. You have Kalisto, Lince Dorado, and Grand Metalik versus TJP, Gentleman Jack Gallagher, and Drew Gulak. Of course, this is coming after the news of Enzo Amore being released with the accusation of him sexually assaulting a woman late last year. So in that one, I guess you're going to go with the heels just because everybody who's on the babyface team seems to be the guys in 205 Live that take the L's. So I'm going with TJP, Gentleman Jack Gallagher, and Drew Gulak. In the championship matches, you have AJ Styles versus Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. This is really interesting because I think it's safe to say that, the WWE loves AJ Styles. He's a safe champion. He makes any storyline, play out very well. But with all the drama of Shane McMahon, of Daniel Bryan, of turning Sami Zayn heel, I think it'd be crazy and so entertaining if they gave them the title. So just for the sake of shaking it up and going somewhere we haven't seen before, I think Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn win. And in the Brock Lesnar, Braun Strowman, Kane match for the Universal Championship, I think going Brock Lesnar, and I'll tell you why in just a little bit, but I think this is obviously Kane's match to take the pin, and he can go out and run for mayor. And then I think Braun Strowman loses this to get into the Royal Rumble, and Braun Strowman's going to have some type of claim to being in the next Universal Championship match. And Brock Lesnar's gone this long, you're not going to just drop the title at the Royal Rumble. But then we have our two main events, and legit, this is two main events. You have the 2018 Women's Royal Rumble match, the first ever. I think it's fair to say this one might go to Asuka. I think this is a perfect way to get her to WrestleMania, unless Ronda Rousey's in it. Everybody's guess. If Ronda Rousey's in it, she wins it. If not, I think you go with Asuka. And in the men's 2018 Royal Rumble match, I hate to say it, it's Roman Reigns. How else do you get Roman into WrestleMania? People want to say they might do a number one contenders match at Elimination Chamber. Sure, you could do that, or you could just put the title on the line, like it really matters. But if not Roman Reigns, do they really have that? If it's not Roman Reigns, then it's not somebody from Raw. So it's not Finn Balor. It's not Seth Rollins. It's not Bray Wyatt. It's not Matt Hardy. It's none of these guys. Maybe Braun Strowman? But then what do you do with Roman at WrestleMania? So I think Roman Reigns wins the WrestleMania. Maybe you get a double elimination. And Roman Reigns and Braun Strowman eliminate each other and they have to fight Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. Should be really interesting. Let me know, how do you think NXT TakeOver Philadelphia and the 2018 Royal Rumble match shake out?
Mercado Airwaves is brought to you by supporters at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves.
If you would like to support Mercado Airwaves, visit us at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. Find us on iTunes at Mercado Airwaves. Keep up to date with the show on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. Follow Mike on Twitter at mmercado2333 and on Instagram, Mike Mercado2333.
Okay, friends, it is my favorite part of the show where we talk with you, the community, our friends. We ask you throughout the week on our Facebook and on Twitter. Facebook at Mercado Airwaves and on Twitter at mmercado2333. What is in your mind when it comes to the world of sports? We take your best comments and questions and we talk about them right here on the show. Let's get right into it, guys. What did you have for me this week? This one comes from friend of the show, Adam Mergens. He asks, does the blowout today of the Vikings diminish the importance of the Minnesota Miracle that occurred last week? This is, of course, comes from right after the NFC and AFC Championship Sunday. Again, the Philadelphia Eagles beating the Minnesota Vikings and the New England Patriots beating in a comeback against the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Philadelphia Eagles versus the New England Patriots in the Super Bowl rematch should be pretty interesting. We will actually have a preview of that show and a prediction on our very next Saturday Sports Stuff episode. But to answer your question, I believe regardless of the outcome of the NFC Championship game, that play, that Minnesota miracle, as some people are calling it, from Case Keenum to Stephon Diggs to get them past New Orleans, it's not diminished, period. It's in history. Nobody 20 years from now will think that they lost the Super Bowl that year. That play is once in a lifetime, once in a generation. There'll be many Super Bowl champions. And of course, the ultimate goal is to win the Super Bowl. I bet you if you ask them, they'd rather the Super Bowl than that play. But if we're asking if it diminishes, absolutely not. When we talk about the Immaculate Catch with Pittsburgh and Oakland, Pittsburgh won that game. They lost the very next week. The play is huge. It becomes part of lore. It becomes part of the legend that is the sport. So at least that's my thoughts on it. All right, so here's some thoughts on when the XFL announcement was made. This comes from Michael Ambro, friend of the show. I love the fact that he said politics will not be allowed in it. Politics have ruined football lately. Well, again, it's all perspective, right? Like, I understand if you work a 40-hour work week and you don't want to deal with politics outside of it, but to be fair, and I'm not picking sides, I mean, you all know what sides I'm on, but President Trump is the one that brought football into this. He's the one that talked about sports. And once that all started happening, once we realized that all entertainment is mixed together, essentially now, even politics, that it's all one thing. There's no getting away from it. Whether it's in Hollywood or in sports or at your job, it doesn't matter. Politics are involved. And isn't the idea of no politics in my sports means that that's a political statement? Standing for the national anthem, isn't that a political statement in today's world? Something to think about. Zach Schomer, refreshing. The NFL is pretty predictable and boring. Sure, it's boring during the regular season when you're watching the Bears versus the Browns, and it's two teams that can't play well, and there's a lot of penalties. But you can't tell me that during this playoffs you haven't had a good time watching a lot of these teams. And being predictable, what's predictable about a dynasty other than the fact that they're dominating? We've never seen this before. I understand wanting new blood, fresh blood. I would have loved to have seen Jacksonville in the Super Bowl. Of course I would have. I would have loved the story of Goliath going down. But at the same token, you have to appreciate greatness. That's part of being a fan, or at least being part of this aspect of it. Very interesting. This is from David Foss. The colors are red, white, and blue, and leans right. How is it not political for his buddy Trump? And he talks about 3-hour football games being laborious, but Raw is a laborious 3 hours every week. LOL. I'll believe it when I see the first game. It's very interesting. I mean, he's right. Again, even politics to the side, even your political views to the side, isn't saying somebody has to do something like that, a political statement. And something he actually has control of, like, the production of a television show. He doesn't want to make it 3 hours. The only reason he does it 3 hours is because he wants ad revenue, right? Well, if he makes more money, if the XFL ends up being a success, which I think it might be, and if it makes him more money for it to be 3.5 hours with commercials and just extending certain plays and taking more TV timeouts, you don't think he'll do it? You don't think he'll do it? I took, as the week has gone on, I've definitely taken everything he said with a grain of salt. Because at the end of the day, he's just a promoter. This comes from my cousin, actually. This comes from Guasalito. It's going to flop again, LOL. The Arena Football League is an alternative to the NFL. And what's their numbers? Who knows when their playoff starts? But you see, and I think I mentioned this earlier on in the show, you can't measure it as if it's competition. It's not. It's just another television show. It's not directly competing with it for ratings to begin with. So it's not like for all you wrestling fans, WCW and WWF. They're not fighting for the same airtime. This is a little different. Now, do I think it's going to have major numbers? Of course not. But you make a couple bucks in ads, you get a couple people to watch it. There's millions of channels on television. He owns his own streaming website. I mean, who's to say it will flop this time? This comes from Sean Anderson. He hate me, needs to make a comeback too. Yeah, he does. Again, friend of the show, Adam Mergens. Brewers making the push. They were in first place for 70-plus games last year. Do the recent acquisitions put them over the hump in the NL Central? Yeah, and that's after this weekend, them signing Christian Yelich and signing Lorenzo Cain. It was a big move for Milwaukee, in control of this division for a very long time, and it seemed like they're inexperienced and they just kind of ran out of gas towards the end of the season. I think this is really cool because a lot of teams in this league that were in Milwaukee's position as the years have gone on have just stuck to their normal ways. And however much success they got from whatever the roster was at that point or wherever they were in the development, they were cool with that. Milwaukee took a totally different approach. Milwaukee's like, hey, we think we can contend now. We're going to try to cash in now. The perfect example is look at what Pittsburgh did. How many years were the Pittsburgh Pirates in contention? They were just right there in the playoffs. They were one game away. They were always in the battle. And they never quite got over the hump because they never made that move. Same thing with the Cincinnati Reds. You've seen it with teams that are willing to make that extra move, to make that gutsy call, to say we are here for the long haul. And I think Milwaukee looks like a very dangerous team. And I think the Cubs have done a good job of trying to counter that. They've homegrown a lot of their talent, especially a lot of their positional talent. And if they do sign Yu Darvish, if they're able to come in and bring two pitchers into this pitching rotation, it's going to be a hell of a battle. And if Jake Arrieta signs with the Cardinals, the NL Central might be the best division in baseball. And, for all you Chicago baseball fans, look out for the White Sox. I don't think they're going to do much contending this year. They have a really nice team. And I'm really excited to see what they do, too. Even as a Cub fan, I'm really excited to see what the South Side has to bring in the American League. So it's a lot of interesting stuff. All right, and the last one of the day is actually the question I proposed to you all on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves and on Twitter at mmercado2333. I asked a quick question, maybe not a simple one. Who do you believe is the face of sports? Now, here's a couple of answers. Sean Anderson. That's a really tough question. If you narrow it down to what sport, that would be easier to answer. In my opinion, there is no one face to all of sports. Very interesting perspective. I'll give you my thoughts in a second. Dean Vaccarino was about to say pretty much the same thing. Matt Consolazio, friend of the show, can't answer that because even during the Jordan era, you had Wayne Gretzky. There have always been multiple greats. What a shame it is that Mike Trout still isn't the face of baseball. This comes from Dean Vaccarino. Yeah, I think we have so much sports coverage that one guy can't represent all sports. It's not like we're all just waiting around on ESPN anymore. Sports media is completely overflooded. Matthew McCullough with Messi, hands down. Zach Schomer with Ronaldo. Paul Shivari with LeBron James, probably. Steve asks a great question. You talking worldwide, nationally, or locally, right now, or all time? And of course, Fernando Navarro. God, they're always thanking him. Thank you all for those answers and those questions. A really interesting conversation. You guys can continue the conversation at Mercado Airwaves and on Twitter at mmercado2333. But to me, when I first asked that question, I thought there was a face of sport. I thought for the longest time it was Tiger Woods, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, LeBron James. But when I asked Nicole, she thought it was Tim Tebow. When was the last time Tim Tebow played in the league? When I asked my mother, she said Aaron Rodgers. Again, it goes back to the XFL question of whether it will succeed or not. There's just so many sports, and so many people just watch one type and watch just one team that it is kind of hard to say who's the face of sports. I definitely think each generation has its Mount Rushmore, and it is interchangeable. But for the longest time, Michael Phelps and Usain Bolt were the biggest stars in the world, and they're not like that anymore. So it's very interchangeable. But that'll do it for us, guys. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. Really appreciate you joining us on Saturday Sports Stuff here on Mercado Airwaves. I'm your host, Mike Mercado. You can follow us everywhere in the universe if you want to be part of the conversation. Let us know what you were thinking about throughout the week in the world of sports. I'm on Twitter at mmercado2333. Like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. You can like, rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes at Mercado Airwaves. If you're a Google or Android user, we have you covered. Go to soundcloud.com/Mercado Airwaves. We're on YouTube. You can actually comment on all our videos and be part of the conversation there as well. YouTube.com/Mike Mercado2333. If you would like to see behind the scenes what we're up to, follow me on Instagram, Instagram.com/Mike Mercado2333. And every one of our shows, every one of our interviews is brought to you by our amazing producers over at Patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. If you want to hear any one of our episodes or interviews ad-free or before anybody else, if you would like to have your brand brought to a huge, diverse group of audience, we have a tier just for you. That's Patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. Thank you as always for joining us on Saturday Sports Stuff with Mike Mercado here on Mercado Airwaves. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. We will see you next Saturday.